Hi everyone, hope everyone is well. This evening I am playing one of the Jours De Glorie game, Napoleonic war game series. This is Zurich, 25th of September 1799. It is the B1 scenario from the Early Glories game in the series that I have featured quite a lot on my YouTube channel. There's actually a couple of scenarios for this particular call it campaign battle rather than campaign. But I'm playing tonight the first scenario. It isn't too many turns. I think it's about 7 turns, so I should be able to get it done in an evening. We've got the game set up. We've got the French forces on this side of the map here. And we've got the Russian forces mostly in and around the Zurich area itself. Got a couple of Russian counters, horse and foot here. The French objective, the way I'm playing this tonight, I'm playing it solo. It's not a solitaire game. There's no bot or anything like that. Playing both sides. The French objective this evening is to take Zurich itself. They need to get into Zurich, which is not an easy task, and control the centre hex there. To do so, there's a couple of features in this particular scenario. This river that runs along here is impassable. You can pass it. It goes to a stream in this sort of area down the bottom of the map here. But it's impassable. However, some of the French have boats to get across the river, and they have a pontoon here. Their tactic will be to boat across the river and take care of these Russian units here, secure the river, and then get the pontoon and get all the French forces across the river, and then up along this road here, and engage the Russians on the north side of the river here, sort of in this area here. We would expect the Russians, of course, are going to try their hardest to stop such a tactic. They do have quite a few counters. I mean, they don't have anywhere near as many counters as the French do, but they will be coming. These counters here are going to hold on. These French counters are going to try and harass them and just keep them occupied while the other French cross the river and make good moving eastwards along across that road. We'll see how that plays out. That's the tactics of this evening. I do like to try and formulate a tactic before I play, and that tactic may change, may adopt to what's happening, but formulate some sort of plan for both sides and see how that plays out when playing games like this solo. I've got it all ready. What is worth pointing out, for those not familiar with this game, it is a chit pull game. The French have a lot more chits than the Russians do, which basically means the French are going to be activating their units a lot more, or there's more chance that they'll be able to activate their units in succession than the Russians will. There are, I don't believe there are any French reinforcements in this particular scenario, but there are some Russian reinforcements, so that could alter the battle. I think overall the French are going to have a hard time. I think they'll be able to get across the river, but they are going to have to secure it because under the rules, these counters here could stop a pontoon from being put across the river to move troops across. So I think the French will be able to do that. It's moving across the road and then being stopped by the Russians. They're just going to hold them up. It's whether they can whether they can take that objective in the time they have to do so. I'm not always the best at playing, optimal movements, optimal strategies. This is the second time I've played this. Hopefully I'll do a bit better this time in terms of the better strategy. But I'm not the best at sort of working out the pure optimum of this. So we'll see how we get on. Sometimes I give myself an extra turn to reflect that. Because I'm playing the game solo, I'm pretty much using the rules out of the rulebook. There's a couple of house rules I may do, just to keep the game flowing. I've got this evening. I do in theory have tomorrow evening as well, but I want to get it wrapped up. I want to get this game finished in these couple of evenings. Should be able to do so. It's not the thing is, it's not many counters, but especially the French, they will have potentially two activations per turn. So that can take a little bit of time doing all those activations. At the end of the first turn, the French have been able to get across the river. They were able to move these units here across the river first, engage with the Russians, and have routed their foot counter here, which is now routing across the board. And their horse, the Russian horse unit counter has taken home in, I'm not going to try and pronounce that, Klosterfer, maybe. French need to remove that next turn. French have been, there's a bit of a natural bottleneck here on the movement. However, this side of the map here, the French have been able to move up into form up, ready to engage the Russians. Maybe in the next turn. Russians haven't been able to do anything. They were just unlucky in the random order of the chit pools. So the Russians are sort of biding their time. They have, however, moved up into defensive positions on this road here. So they're in quite good defensive positions here and here. And the idea being that when the French encounter them, it's just going to slow them up. Maybe not repel them, just slow them. And the French are going to simply run out of time, run out of daylight time, really. The game, I think, finishes at turn 9, which is about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The game started at, I think, at 5 o'clock in the morning, so just under 5 o'clock in the morning. Most unseemingly hour of the day, in my opinion, 5 o'clock in the morning, but there you go. So, yeah, looking forward to doing the next turn. The first turn is a lot of just moving and going through the chip pools, and a couple of rules I've double checked on as well. So looking forward to turn number 2. That was quite a dramatic turn, and probably one of the most important turns of the game. Not because of the French troops moving this way, but instead what happened here in the centre. So the French took a bit of a gamble. They saw an opportunity to attack the Russians with both infantry and with horse and artillery. But really, it was the infantry and the horse. They were able to push the Russians back, and unfortunately, the Russians were unable to form squares. So they were hammered by the French hussars, and I think it was the chasseurs as well, if I remember correctly. The chasseurs and hussars really gave them a good mauling. But they have been able to recover, and they've formed up this defensive area just outside of the city. Probably what we'll do in the next turn, if the Russians get the chits they need, we may even pull the Russians back behind the city. Or what we'll probably the other option, the tactical option here, is to let them set where they are, knowing they can fall back into the city. And again, just try and keep the French from the city walls. Now, the French also are moving up here. It is slow progress. But the next turn, they should be able to, maybe the turn after, get into this area here. Like I said, I'm not, in this complete truth, I'm not always the best at working out the optimal movement capacity and all that sort of stuff. So that's probably on my end that I haven't. Maybe the French, if I'd have really thought about it a lot more, maybe the French could be another few hexes along. I'm not entirely sure, but it is what it is. Certainly, it's a very enjoyable game. That's all that matters to me. And then at the bottom here, the French are looking greedily at this town here, this hex here that does have some Russian defenders. Maybe what the French can do here is take this, and then maybe this formation here can have a crack at the southern side of the objective and meet up with these and battle with these Russian counters here. That will be a challenge, but it can be done. Yeah, so we'll play another turn and we'll see. I'll let you know how that works out. That was another very dramatic turn. The French are, there's no way around it. They are steamrolling the Russians. This formation here, I've just got every single die roll they needed. Even when I pushed the luck a little bit, and I felt like in the character of the French army in this historical period, they're just seeing success and they are just pushing so hard against the Russians, with cavalry charges, with the foot attacking very aggressively. They have been able to capitalize on the momentum that they had, at least in my mind as I'm seeing the battle play out. And the French have pushed into the actual city itself. They literally got every single die roll they needed, even with a 1 in 10 chance of getting the die roll. Well, they needed a 9 at one point, and they got a 9 on the dice roll. The Russians are having a very hard time, and I think we'll do another turn, and the Russians just may throw in the towel and raise the white flag and hand over the city to the French. The Russians, however, have been able to hold on to this quite defiantly. Hold on to this this hex here, this sort of town hex here, and repelled the French attack there. There's been no attacking on here on the road yet. The French have moved their dragoons into a defensive position should there be any Russian reinforcements. I haven't actually looked ahead to see what reinforcements there are too much, so I'm playing that a little blind. Again, in character of the French army. They are making some progress on the road, not as much maybe as they would like, getting a little bit bogged down. That's just symbolised by the chits that have been pulled. I mean, I see a rogue French chit here off the board. I forgot to move it. Oh dear. Casualties of war and all that. Not that it matters, because the French really are dominating this battlefield so far, and just incredible die roll, which in my mind, when I'm playing the battle out in my imagination, I'm seeing acts of heroic bravery on the French side, and the Russians defiantly trying to hold ground but can't, and the French just pushing so aggressively and taking this objective. The Russians' best hope here is just to try and repel the French back out, but it's very hard to see how they're going to do that. The French units here are very, very good. Now the Russians do have some good units here. This unit here is particularly good. So it may be that the Russians are going to call those back into the city and get them to try and sort out the French and push them back out. We'll see how that plays out in the next turn. I think the next turn could be the end turn, as it were. It's not literally the end turn, but we'll see how that one plays. Quite an interesting turn. The French first. I'll just move this out of the way. The French first. So they're making progress on this road here. They've been able to push the Russians out of this town here. They're now engaging the Russians into the next part of that road, and they want to dominate this road, which is a good job because the Russians are starting to push them out of the city, and they've got some chunky reinforcements coming in. That's a technical military history term, that is, chunky reinforcements, but they do have some rather splendid reinforcements coming in, who are going to make life very hard for the French. And the French are in the city walls for sure, but only just. And the Russians got some very good die rolls, and the French some very bad ones, and everything went the Russians' favour for a change in this game tonight. So the Russians just got to hold on. We've just played 1100 hours, so there are a few more turns to go. So the Russians have got to hold on, I think, 3 more turns. The French, remember, they've got to take this hex, that one that's there. That's how I'm playing it this evening. They've got to take that one to gain control of the city, and we'll see. They've got time, but the Russians aren't going to make it easy for them. So the Russians are just able to hang on, just clinging on to the city there. They are now getting encircled. The French are just moving up and just pushing them back. The French have been able to reinforce into the outskirts of the city. They are in the city walls, remember. So really, we need to see what happens in the next turn, and see if the I think there's maybe some reinforcements actually for the Russians. Just see if the French can push in, or if the Russians can just hold them back and repel them. So we'll see. So we're going to call the game there. The French were able to take, not surprisingly, take the control hex there. They've got masses of reinforcements coming up on this road here. The Russians were able to hold them back across this. I think it's a small river, stream, etc. But they were looking good to make an attack on there. So I think in terms of the narrative of the battle, I can imagine the Russians looking at the masses of French pouring into the city through this gate here, and the fierce combat and fighting, and then seeing the reinforcements moving up on this road here, and to the south, of course, would be probably throwing it, wanting to surrender and let the French take the city. And that is that, as they say. It was a really good scenario. I really enjoyed that. Quite a strong narrative. It's quite interesting when you play war games, where it's backwards and forwards could go either way. And it's also quite interesting when one side's clearly winning, and then at different times the enemy or their enemy show their teeth and manage to push back. From a narrative point of view, from a playing the game solo point of view, this had lots of different components in the game this evening, and for that I really, really enjoyed it. It is a game system I clearly enjoy very much. I've covered it extensively on my YouTube channel. I'm super interested if anybody has played this game. Please leave some comments and describe how this game turned out for you. Super interested. As always, really, really enjoyable wargaming evening this evening playing this. I think there's a second scenario because from memory the history was over 2 days. So I'll set up probably the second scenario next, or I might have a break and move on to something else. We'll see. But yeah, really enjoyed that, and thanks a lot for watching as always. Thank you.